You're listening to the Digital Signage Today podcast. As business leaders look for ways to improve productivity and profitability, they're increasingly turning to innovative automation and self-service technologies. But keeping up with the rapid pace of new innovations can be overwhelming. Now there's a website to help you do just that. From the publishers of Kiosk Marketplace, Vending Times, and Digital Signage Today, Automation and Self-Service covers trends in artificial intelligence, robotics, kiosks, payments, and much more. Visit the site today and subscribe at www.automationandselfservice.com.
Welcome to the Digital Signage Today podcast. This is our debut pilot episode, and we have a special guest joining us live from New York City, Chris Grosso. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Thanks, Dan. So happy to be here, and thanks for having me. Chris Grosso, I'm the CEO of Intersection. We're the leading experience-based digital out-of-home company, and we're focused on major U.S. cities like New York, Chicago, Philadelphia, and elsewhere, and really focused on bringing consumer amenities to cities like our Link NYC program, which is the Wi-Fi program in New York, or bus shelters in places like Philadelphia, and then monetizing them through data-driven advertising, usually on digital screens.
I so appreciate you being here today because we have covered a ton of news on this space because you have the intersection, no pun intended, of digital out of home. You've got transportation, people getting back out of after the COVID lockdowns and so forth. People are realizing, hey, transit hubs are big, sports are big. We've covered a ton of digital out of home happening in sports stadiums, arenas, and football is getting bigger and bigger. And I was very curious to kind of chat with you because there's a lot of money being made and there's a lot of opportunities that still have not been snapped up, even as the smart city begins to grow and build steam, that movement. Could you just very briefly tell us, what is this smart city movement? Is it a fad? And why is it becoming so big from sports stadiums to beyond?
Right. Well, I think if you think about cities and what brings together a city, a few things bring together a city more than football, and that could be both the NFL teams or the college teams. These events are often the biggest events that happen in the city, and they happen 16 times a year, 8 times a year in terms of the regular season games. And you bring a huge amount of people together. And often these are some of the biggest transit days of the year. So I think, if you want to build smart cities, you want to be a smart cities provider, the ability to take advantage of this massive groupings of people coming together and help facilitating them coming together is a key piece of the equation. And if you think about the modern stadiums and the modern arena, more and more they are being close to public transit. They're more often in cities. And the ability to, reach the stadium via public transit is a really important part of being a livable city. You take a city like Minneapolis, where that in one of the podcasts rated as the best NFL stadium for transit. That stadium is right in the middle of downtown. There's 2 light rail lines coming in, and you can, get to the stadium without having to get to your car, even tailgate. They call it railgate. And be around the stadium. And if you're a smart cities provider, you want to be where the people are, and that's where the people are on Sundays.
I'm curious, just ballpark figure, how many impressions are we talking during a game day campaign?
If just off the top of my head, if you think about it, these stadiums, you have 70 or 80,000 people coming, 30% of them are probably coming through mass transit or more, but even the ones who don't come through mass transit are going to be in and around the stadiums, in and around the stadium stations. So, just on a people basis, take 80,000 people, throw a few impressions on top of that because they're going to see multiple ads. And, you easily can get into the millions across either the transit or the stadium itself in terms of ad impressions. And it's a highly engaged audience.
Well, I was just going to say highly engaged audience. It's like a captive audience, and you already know the most important things about them in terms of their passion in a way.
No, for sure. And what you can also start to do too is when you're advertising on game day, you advertise at the stadium, but you also know where people are coming in from a transit perspective as well. So you can advertise around game day at the stations or on the street furniture on the route into the game itself. And that could both be countdown clocks, that could be hype content, that could be preview content like starting lineups and that kind of thing that you can put on the digital signs. So again, you want to be a smart city. Part of being a smart city is being smart in how you communicate things to people, and game day content on screens in the city, even if people aren't at the stadium, is another way to engage the sports fans very effectively.
Do you have some outstanding examples of some of the creative examples of how people are starting to leverage this growing medium?
Well, one area that folks have leveraged is putting a permanent presence near stadiums. And a perfect example of that is BetMGM at the Meadowlands actually renamed the line that goes to the Meadowlands. It's the BetMGM line. So it's a permanent presence that you can build next to the stadium that affiliates, your brand with that experience. So I think that's a very good example. Another good example is how brands will sometimes sponsor rides home after the game. And a lot of transit authorities will provide free transportation post-game as a service to the city, and could put a sponsor against that. And that's something, we've worked with the transit authorities to do as well. So I think there's multiple opportunities beyond just the throw a sign, which is a great opportunity too. Just put the sign up outside when people are going to the stadium is certainly something that's a great thing to do. But you can also do these other sort of more creative ways of showing how the brands are sponsoring or helping sponsor the experience of getting to and from the stadium.
I had no idea that you could literally get a free ride, if you will, to and from the game. Like, what kind of brands are doing this?
You see beverages do this kind of thing a lot.
We see this rise not only in the ad targeting and programmatic or PDOOH, but I'm seeing so much about the AI integrations. And of course, that's the big buzzword, is artificial intelligence. How is that changing the game here?
Well, I haven't seen a lot of AI in out of home specific to sports yet. But what you are seeing with AI is in the customization of advertising on digital signage at scale in a way that you were never able to do before. And what I mean by that is, every time you make a creative, you need a person to create that different pieces of creative. With some of the more generative AI tools, you can make hundreds and hundreds of pieces of creative that are highly customized. And you can start to imagine ways that could tie into sports as well. But at minimum, is there a world where, say, we have in New York, we have 2,000 Link Wi-Fi kiosks? There could be a world where every one of those units has a customized piece of art from a sponsor that's highly tailored to that individual block or individual neighborhood. That's something you never could do before. And I don't have an immediate answer on how that applies to football, but you could certainly see ways of using that kind of customization power to customize content highly tied to the fans themselves. And again, what's beautiful about sports is it's one of the few things in today's society that everyone in a community can rally around, which I think is really what makes it so special. It's, there's pretty consistent, if you're in Philadelphia, you're going to root for the large part, going to root for the Eagles, and nothing can bring a city together in a productive way like a sports team's run towards a championship. So it's just, as someone who looks at cities, spends time in cities and thinks about cities a lot, these sports teams play a hugely valuable role in bringing people together. And that's something that's, doesn't always happen in today's world.
And the power of local communities. And what strikes me hearing you talk about even some of the AI generated content, making it more affordable, I'm thinking, okay, we're seeing a mass movement towards the democratization of the digital signage and advertising landscape for small to mediums, indies, mom and pops. So I'm thinking, well, if I own a little, bar and grill near the stadium, suddenly maybe I can start profiting and leveraging from this in the same way that one of the big beverage companies is, and that further builds the local community and puts money back into the local community.
Yeah, no, I think that's very, very much true. And I think one of the real opportunities for marketers when they're supporting the transit or the street furniture or some of these other advertising categories is that the media investment people are making is immediately going back to the community. So, whether it's us or, JCDecaux does this, Outfront does this as well. It's not just us. But a lot of times, you collect that revenue. A lot of that revenue goes right directly back to the community in terms of literally cash payments. And another big chunk of that revenue will go to fund critical amenities like the bus shelters, like the free Wi-Fi, like the digital communication networks. So, it's a way for brands to really, really support these communities in a positive way.
That's brilliant. We were just talking to in Spokane. We were talking to the public facilities department about how it's not a for-profit thing when they bring in these big concerts to the public arenas. It's how they're funding the infrastructure, and that benefits everybody in the local community. And I think that's a very powerful thing. Now, in terms of the technology used, are we talking about e-paper? Are we talking about traditional LEDs? Is it some kind of mix?
In terms of our signage? Yeah, I think, look, there's two big buckets, right? I mean, we'll do traditional LEDs that could be both small format or large format. LEDs is kind of our that's kind of the bread and butter of our digital business. But there's also just the traditional static printed advertising that also works well. But, what we've been able to do and what the industry's been able to do is overlay digital technology on the printed ads so that, we have a sense based on the digital mobile devices, that data that you can get from third parties in a privacy-friendly way to understand who's actually seeing the ad and what they do afterwards. And what's really interesting, and again, I think this is the medium and the locations more than anything, is that every time we've looked at whether or not people who've seen ads and interacted with the ads and what they've done afterwards, these ads have huge performance in terms of driving online behavior. People see the ad. They might see the ad digitally. They might see the ad static, but then they will take an online action afterwards. So it's a very valuable way for brands to acquire customers, build relationships with customers, and acquire customers as well. And that goes beyond both the digital sign for sure, but also even the traditional printed sign as well.
We talked about sort of the collapse of the silo where digital signage and digital advertising is becoming this huge interconnected entity. It's almost like the metaverse in a sense, where even a printed ad is part of the metaverse because of the QR code and because of the mobile interactivity.
Exactly.
Do you have a word to say to folks about the power, advertisers, about the power of, hey, you need to embrace this sort of metaverse, mobile interactive world?
Well, yeah, I mean, there's no substitute for real life. We learned this during COVID. We learned this after COVID. The ability to interact with people when they're living their real lives is hugely, hugely valuable. And I think there's no substitute for it. So you can get a lot of the benefits that you have from your digital advertising, but you also get all this way higher engagement by interacting, putting your ads in front of people in physical space where they can't skip it, where people are tired of looking at screens and looking down at the screen, so they're seeing things in physical space. You really can cut through the clutter in a way the digital advertising can't, but you get all the metrics and data and goodness and that you can from your digital ads, plus all the benefits of being in physical space. So I think it's given the value that can be created from the out-of-home advertising, I think you're going to see a ton of growth over the next 3 or 4 years because there's a lot of untapped opportunity for marketers to leverage this medium for sure.
What kind of creative, what kind of content, what kind of things should you do in this crowded landscape to stand out from the competition? Is it the 7-second rule? Is it the motion rule? Like what kind of stuff are you seeing?
I think it's the useful rule. I think you want to have screens that provide value to the consumer and the person walking down the street. And if you provide value, they're going to pay attention. And value can come in different ways. It can come what time my train is coming. It could be the weather. It could be the sports scores. It could be art. It could be a fun fact. But what we've seen time and time again is that you can condition people to look up to get a little piece of information or a little piece of happiness about their day. And then you can put the ads in as well. So I think, having engaging content on the screens is always job one. I mean, more important than anything else, if you've got great content that people are going to engage with, they're going to look at your screens. And that's part one. Part two is location, right? If you put the screen in the right place, they can't help but see it. And one of the reasons I spent much of my career in digital media, and one of the things I always loved about the out-of-home space is from an audience development perspective, if you put the placement right, you've gotten half the battle. There's no You can't get disintermediated by one of the online platform companies. It's there. You walk down the street and you see it. And that goes back to where we started, which is you want to be where places where people are convening at mass and at scale. And, you know, a place like Penn Station, that's every day. A place like Times Square, that's every day. But almost every weekend, that's one of these stadiums. And that could be a football game, or, you know, what we really saw, this summer was Taylor Swift and the massive impact that she and her concerts had on the economy and on these cities was huge. And you know, that doesn't happen online. That only happens in real life.
Are there any mistakes people are making that you think, hey, avoid this? And are there any untapped opportunities that you're like, man, you know, smart businesses should really be jumping in here quick?
I think the biggest untapped opportunity is retail media. I think the amount of digital signage that is close to, adjacent to retail locations is large. I think every anecdotal piece of data I've seen is when you see an ad for something outside of a store to go buy the thing, you buy the thing. And, you know, retail media is growing at massive rates. And I do think a chunk of that ought to go to out of home, because you can get a lot of that same, just like you're buying, you know, retargeting on the internet for retail media, buy the ad outside the store. It's just, it's not rocket science. It will have huge impact on the business. That's a massive untapped opportunity for people. In terms of things people to look out for, I do think thinking about when to transition from a printed sign to a digital sign and making that transition at the right time and in the right places is hugely important. You get 3, 4, 5 times as many ad impressions from a digital sign than a printed sign based on the flips. And you got to make sure that the math pencils out to spend the money on a good digital sign, because, you know, it's expensive to put one of these in. It's expensive to operate these things. So you want to make sure they're in the right locations and at the right scale that makes sense. I think when I got into this job, when I started in out of home 8 years ago, my view was digitize everything. And reality is you can get a lot of the benefits in your printed ads by putting things like QR codes and the digital data that you can pull together from the printed ad. So you want to do a lot of digital, but you want to do the right amount of digital in the right places. I think that's getting that balance right is one of the most important determinants on whether a business model is going to be successful in this space.
I've been hearing so many C-level folks and consultants and researchers talk about the phys-digital or the phygital, and making your brand identity, your brand story kind of straddle both, you know, the physical and the digital. Make your physical digital. And it sounds like that's tracking very well. And I also love how you mentioned retail media, which is exploding. And we saw Amazon, Walmart, Kroger. There's so many brands jumping onto this. And we talked to Ori Moore of YCharge, who globally, they're expanding in retail media, because at the point of sale, that's the point of decision, and research is really showing impact. And what I also love in this industry is that folks are starting to say, oh, database decision-making is not just for IT. Well, let's look at the data. What does the data say? And it's showing amazing things about the ROI of these digital signs. On a personal aesthetic level, what's one of your favorite ads or contents or examples that you saw and you said they nailed it?
I think leaving aside our stuff, just as an industry observer, I think a lot of the large format work in 3D in places like Times Square has been very, very impressive aesthetically, and really, really good. Like, hat tip to the folks doing many of those campaigns. Going back to some of the stuff that we do, the things I like best are our ability with products like Link to take over a city at scale at a moment in time. So, you know, in New York, there's this thing called Manhattan Henge, where the sun lines up with the street grid. And, you know, we sold a sponsorship for someone to sponsor and take over the entire city at that moment. And the ability to have all the screens basically with an ad referencing Manhattan Henge with the sun, like, you know, lined up right on the street grid was really cool. And I think the ability, as I said, I think the ability with our medium and in our media to be able to take over a city at scale very quickly at a moment in time and really bring a city together in a way that is very hard to do, as the thing I like best on what we do. But, you know, as I look at, you know, when I think about some of our competitors, because we're not in the billboard space, I think what folks are doing with these big, large format screens in some of these places is also really, really impressive. And, I think what's great about our medium is these products really work together in tandem in a pretty compelling way.
And by the way, the public safety benefits, that's growing as well. So that's a great benefit. And I think it ties into one thing. What are your thoughts on making your digital out of home, whether it's football, smart city, retail, beyond, sustainable, making it privacy friendly? And can you do that and also be super successful? What's the mix?
Yes. Well, look, privacy friendly is core to what we do. We work with municipalities, so we need to do right by them, and they're pretty clear on their expectations around privacy. So everything we do is extremely privacy friendly. We don't use personally identifiable data. We do not target people in public space. The Minority Report world of, hey, Chris, we know you looked at something online and we're going to retarget you in public space. We don't do that. I don't think that's something that can be done in a privacy friendly way. So you have to do that. As for sustainability, I agree. It's something that we take very seriously as well. Things we've done, on the static side, on the printed side is a little bit easier. So for instance, we've got bus shelters where we do have lighting in the bus shelters and the printed screens are backlit, and we power those by solar panels, which is double win because it's better for the environment and it's actually cheaper to install because you don't have to pull power, and about the same or a little bit cheaper to operate. And we're testing electric vehicles to go out and service our signs. On the digital side, it's a little bit harder, but we are looking at environmentally friendly, sustainable, renewable energy sources for many of our digital products as well. And then look, inherently in our business, we are very sustainable, give back to society, because one of the biggest levers the city has to reduce its environmental footprint is mass transit. And our whole business is based on supporting mass transit. So as I said earlier, brands that want to do good, support your mass transit systems, right? Sponsor the electric vehicles or electric buses that are taking people around cities, which are taking huge amounts of carbon out of we're not taking carbon out of the atmosphere, but avoiding carbon footprint. It's very easy that if brands want to associate with environmentally friendly causes, the transit system's about as environmentally friendly cause you can get.
The message I keep hearing from you and just from watching the industry is, hey, let's all grow together.
Yeah, this is an industry that we are a small industry in the grand scheme of advertising, right? In the United States, out-of-home advertising is $9 billion. It's a very small portion of the industry. It should be a lot bigger, but all of us as an industry together is more likely to be able to grow and get our fair share given our audience than any of us doing that individually. The last thing I'd say is getting back to the football is I think the Giants are going to have a terrific season. So I'll leave you with that.
All right, I'm going to hold you to that. We're going to come back. We're going to have a follow-up.
If the Giants win the Super Bowl, you got to bring me back on the podcast.